Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nathalie Moll, and I'm the Director General of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, of which InPharma is a very esteemed member. I'd like to thank InPharma very much for inviting me to address the meeting today, where you will be hearing new data from the Visceral Group, very important data, and where you will be discussing also about the value of innovation, not only to patients, healthcare systems, but also to the economy. Before I start saying anything else, I'd like to congratulate Poland for its 20 years membership of the European Union last week on the 1st of May. What an incredible impact it has had, not only on Poland, but also on Europe, to have you part of this family. You have had an incredible development over the last 20 years, with a nearly doubling of your GDP per capita, which is so impressive, and also closing the gap with existing member states in terms of income, not only economically, but also health-wise. The health indicators that have been picked up by the OECD show that the life expectancy has increased, and deaths from cardiovascular disease as well as cancer have decreased substantially in Poland since joining the EU. Also importantly, you have increased your investment in health overall from about 6% to 6.8% of your GDP, while in general in other EU member states, this has remained stable around 11%. So a lot to celebrate in terms of improvements, but I can't say that the EU innovative industry of pharmaceuticals over the last 20 years has had the same level of success as Poland has had. In fact, over the last 20 years, on the contrary, we have seen the gap between European research and development in pharmaceuticals in the other parts of the world widen instead of narrow. There was about a 2 billion euro difference in terms of the amount of money invested in Europe 20 years ago for research and development of innovative pharmaceuticals. And now that gap is 25 billion. So you can see that other regions of the world, like the US, like Asia, have been attracting the investment for research and development away from Europe. What has happened also is in terms of clinical trials, there has been a decrease of nearly 7% in terms of clinical trials in Europe compared to other parts of the world. And in some of the most important areas like advanced therapies, which are cell and gene therapies, where most of the new medicines and cures are coming from, there's been an increase in clinical trials of nearly 200% over the last 20 years, but only 1/3 of those happen in Europe. And this is extremely concerning. Why? Because in these therapies, those are the ones that even during the clinical trials sometimes give results in terms of cures or incredible improvements in health. So there is a need to look at Poland, look at the ambition that you had 20 years ago and the policies that you put in place, and look at that at the European level when it comes to innovation in pharmaceuticals, so that we can close the gap I was talking about and make sure that we have the innovation in Europe to give us the products for our patients as quickly as possible, and that innovation cycle. How can we do that? There are different ways. At the moment, we have an opportunity that the Polish presidency of the EU will also look into. It's the revision of the whole pharmaceutical legislation at European level for the first time in 20 years. 20 years is a theme today. This revision with the right policy decisions can really make a difference in terms of the attractiveness of the EU. At the moment, we have an old regulatory framework of 20 years old, which is not adapted to new developments of technologies of today, but even of the ones of tomorrow with AI. So we need to update that regulatory framework and make it future-proof, make it attractive, make it faster to approve products. And then we need to make sure that we have the right incentives and the right framework that give investors an interest and a reassurance that investing in Europe is the right thing to do. We need to look at what other regions of the world are doing and be at least as good as them, if not better. This means looking at the whole innovation cycle, from the research and development part, so having real EU innovation hubs like we have in the US with Boston, or the UK, the Golden Triangle, making sure policies and funding that at the moment in Europe are a bit fragmented, are much more focused, so that we have these innovation hubs for the research and development. And then we make sure that the middle phase in terms of incentives to develop products is very predictable and attractive, with the right kind of intellectual property that is solid and even better than the one that we have today. And then we need to make sure that we have the digital transformation that allows us to benefit from all the data that we collect in Europe, but we are very many countries, so this data has to be interconnected. And at the end of the day, make the market access also very attractive and easy to follow, if you like, for all sizes of companies, so that patients really get the medicines when they need them. And this is something that, as I mentioned before, the Polish presidency of the Council will also look into. And therefore, Poland has an opportunity to shape the right innovation ecosystem for Europe and for Poland at that time. There are just two areas I wanted to talk about specifically that are very important. One is, of course, access. So innovation doesn't really matter if it doesn't reach patients. If it stays in a laboratory, if it doesn't access the patients at the right time, then it's meaningless. And I think all of us can agree that we need to work much better to make sure that there are no gaps between European member states or even between regions in member states for medicines to reach patients. And this is something that, as the innovative industry, we have focused on a lot over the last 2.5 years. We took a commitment last year to make sure that all our medicines approved at the European level were filed for pricing and reimbursement in all member states within 2 years of that approval. And we are following that filing to make sure that we initiate those discussions with member states and try and get the products to the patients as quickly as possible. Next to that, also we have the ambition of making sure that the medicines reach the countries at the right price, so at the price that a country can pay for that medicine. And this is a discussion that we can't have on our own, because in Europe we have a single market, we have different dynamics, but we have already committed to that concept, and we really look forward, perhaps even under the Polish presidency, to a discussion with member states, with payers, with other stakeholders, to decide how can we make that a reality? How can we make sure that each country pays what it can pay for medicines and make that access faster? So that's an important point that I think we have to keep in mind, because the revision of pharmaceutical legislation is not only about the regulatory process and improving it and making it more future-proof, but it's also about improving access at the moment. Whereas we think this access discussion needs to happen with member states, with stakeholders, very concretely outside of the legislation, so we can make real, tangible progress. And the last element I wanted to talk about, I know I've been quite long, but it's important as well, is health technology assessment. This is another file that is being discussed in Brussels at European level. It is going to come into force on the 12th of January of next year, so it's very real. It's already been agreed as a concept, but now it will start applying as of January of next year to cancer products and advanced therapy products. And why is this important? Because again, this is a proof to the external world that Europe can streamline and can do European things. At the moment, you have 27 health technology assessments, so assessments of the value of a product, if you like. And here with the European one, the idea was we go faster. We have a joint clinical assessment one time, and that will speed up already market access. What we are seeing, which concerns us in the implementation discussions right now, is that there is not so much the idea of aligning behind one joint clinical assessment, but there's more an idea of adding some elements to the national assessments, which is only going to slow things down. And there are some detailed elements that we think really need to be worked on carefully during the implementation together with stakeholders. Things like early engagement between HTA bodies and the industry, make sure we understand what the requirements are, the parameters, so-called PICOs, and make sure that we have enough days to answer those parameters in the best possible way so that you have all the information you need and we can go as fast as quickly, but in a harmonized and knowledgeable way, like we do with other agencies, for example, the European Medicines Agency. There's very early engagement. So a lot of things on the plate from my side. You'll be hearing of some important developments during the event today. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. It would have been really my pleasure to be able to listen directly, but I know that I will get the information as well, and I'm looking forward to reading that. I think we have a great opportunity at the moment. We have a piece of legislation that we're revising for the first time in 20 years, and probably the last time in the next 20 years. We can close that gap with other regions that are pulling away the innovation and the R&D from us. And we can make sure that this industry, which is then an engine also for the generic industry in that life cycle of innovation, is strong in Europe as well. And we are resilient, and we don't rely on other parts of the world to export their medicines to us at some point. This is an industry that employs 850,000 people directly and 2.5 million indirectly. And we also are the biggest contributor to the positive trade balance of Europe with 215 billion in 2022. So let's make sure that we have those clinical trials in Europe for our patients, that we have that research in Europe, that we have that loop, the right ecosystem. And we really look forward to working with all our colleagues at Inpharma, but beyond, all the stakeholders and the government of Poland and the others to make access better and access to innovation better in Europe. Thank you again, and I wish you a fantastic discussion.